ba-da-ba-da-da-da-dee. Ya-da-da-dee-da-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-beep, ba-da-da-da-da-dee-da-da-da-da. Bom, bom. Ya-ba-da-da-da-da-dee-doo. Room 1. High CPU detect. That's supposed to be that. That's okay. Da-da-dee-dee-dee. Disappear. Move. Hello, everyone. How are we doing? Yeah, that's the right one. So where's that one on? There we go. Hopefully that's all sorted out now. Hello, Geoff Wiener, aka Geoff Grognard. Your arguments over the Orlandos would be more. We'll get to when we get to the Orlandos. Calvin Gaswood, both Dr. Clark and pizza chicken plus chicken strips are due to arrive in 5 minutes. That is very, very cruel. There are no chicken strips arriving for me. You're ordering chicken strips, and you know. Juno 119. Pre-ordered your book. Any way to get it faster? Well, for starters, hello, Juno 191. Thank you for pre-ordering the book. And no, at the moment, no way to get it faster. Keldon, I had that on Tuesday. We're slightly better organized this evening. Oh, you're here. That's good to me. Derp Squad, hello. Rock Pain, hello, listening on the phone as I frame a wall. Be very careful if you're using a nail gun while listening on the phone and frame a wall. In this, Felix B, hello to Switzerland. Dan Freeman, hello. And I want to say thank you again to Dan for coming along yesterday with me and Drac around the Fleet Air Arm Museum in Evilton. It was very nice to have an extra person there as cameraman. It did help us do some recording, which will be featured in the Taranto specials. This may or may not be bottle 2 of today. Okay? I'm just leaving that out there. In fact, don't look over there for the bag of empty bottles. Got to take them to the bin. Hello. Let's see. Albertsaski. Hello. I haven't said hello yet to you. And Aviator Enterprise. Hello. Calvin, I think I have some absinthe downstairs. Don't drink that. That's not good. Absinthe is not good. Dan Freeman, I did take the good doctor a bottle of Iron Brew. Yes. Drac got distracted by books. That was that I did play that to my advantage. Yeah, you see, there is an advantage to having had no one so far. Everyone who was supposed to pay me forget to pay me so far in October. In that I have very limited money for books, so I was slightly less attracted to books. So I went hunting. I got the Iron Brew. Drac got the books. Yeah. But he's also going to turn them into PDFs for me, so that's good. I hope. The ones that, of course, he's allowed to by copyright. Okay. He won't break the copyright rules at all. He's a very good guy. Do you know what? I note that McDonald's iced coffee is pretty decent. I'm glad. Good evening, Car. Good evening, Greg Safowski. DGV40, hello. That guy named Dan. I am also back with a fresh bottle of Iron Brew. Shame it's rather expensive to get where I am in the States. I am sorry to hear that. I think Iron Brew should be a universal right, kind of like mandated by the United Nations. But, you know, I'm told that's illegal. Hello, Jay Illingworth. Hello, Silly Manico. Hello, John Shea. Hello, Zachary Gherkin, Buckamere, Frederica Vega. Hello. Hello to my family and especially my girlfriend's family who tend to send me Iron Brew for watching. Thank you for being online this evening. I do know you you're probably slightly worried about the Fisher topic coming up. I promise not to turn this into any of the rants which you may have heard about from me at various history conferences. I promise to keep this as no rant-like as possible, or at least as low-level rant-like as possible. I think I've said hello, Buccaneer, but if I haven't, hello, Buccaneer. And hello, Michael Rose. Hello, sir. I haven't seen you in a while. I'm very glad to be hearing something other than fireworks. We're all happy to be hearing something other than fireworks, although we do enjoy fireworks. It's just that the UK does go a bit mad at this point of the year. The shame, the ones I never make it long enough for them to get one. It's only for Christmas, though. Ooh. Dan Freeman, maybe Jackie Fisher had his coat stolen from a mess club and that made him unhappy with the whole coat guard? Possibly. Abzaski, watching the Orlando live, were you referring to HMS Monmouth and her brethren? Don't think Monmouth was one of the Orlando class. I was talking about the Orlando class of that time. Hey, King's Rook. Hey, X603. Thanks. Thunderchild, yay or nay? I am pro Thunderchild. In fact, I think I've ordered a Thunderchild t-shirt. I'm not sure if one's arrived. If it's arrived yet, actually, no, it has arrived. It's down somewhere. It's being stored somewhere. But I do have a Thunderchild t-shirt. Which, before anyone asks, I bought because I wasn't letting Drac give me one. Because he's very, very generous and very, very kind, and I swear he would give away the shirt on his back if he thought it would be nice for anyone or a treat for anyone. And so I bought it because I can't afford to be one of his patrons at the moment. But when I can, I will do. But I bought his shirt. Right. Stephen Cross. Hello, Stephen Cross. Airman. Good evening. Juno 191. Hello. Let's see. Shumac. Not that I'm coordinating and condoning cybercrime, but you could hack into either Pen and Sword or Dr. Clark. I wouldn't be that cruel to them. Come on, if you're ever in Wales, a cameraman hit me up. I might well have that idea, Carl. Rock Kane, to use a nail gun, I would need a working compressor, which I don't. Screws and drills for me. Good luck. You see, that's the whole reason I like having doing any of those sort of things, is I do get a working nail gun, and that just feels good, a nail gun. You get a very nice, the one I use when I'm working around the house and I have to use a nail gun, makes a very nice shtunk noise, which really is good for when you're building with stuff. Inhappy, hello! Dan Freeman did also get books as well. Felix B. Absinthe has an image problem. It's now legal in Switzerland again. It does. But there again, I have cousins who are policemen police personnel in Glasgow. So, yeah, their view of absinthe might cloud my own judgment. Wait 1 hour and most of the bottle of Iron Brew and we'll see whether the rants happen. Juno 191, you know me too well. Vision, hello, upstate New York. Okay, so let's see. X603, no rants. Oh, there probably will be a rants. The problem legally with absinthe was things like wormwood that are hallucinogenics and things like that. Otherwise, it's just another spirit. I think Monmouth was a Kent class cruiser. Kent class. Yep. That was what was going through my mind. Hello, Michael Curley. Evening. Abzaski, I'm asking about ships that were not scrapped but should have been instead of Orlando. I'm going to get into that. Strub, so happy to publish another stream. Not just listening as normal due to Coast Guard giving me LASIK eye surgery. The standing watch and doing boardings. 7 days medical leave. Woohoo! It's good. And LASIK is very successful. Good evening. Good book on the period. Book at birth of the good book on the art of the period. Birth of the Battleship by J. Beeler. Well, very well sourced. I'll look it up. Shumack. No way Dr. Clark has a railgun, although if you told me he had a core gun, I would totally believe you. I do have it's a slightly older model of a nail gun, but it's yeah. I have all sorts of random things for doing housework around the house, left to me by a father and a grandfather who were, whilst carving and woodworking wasn't their professions, were both very, very keen. One of them was a shipwright, and the other one, well, he retired as a bank manager in the period when there was only one person with the rank with the title manager in a bank, which tells you what you need to know. Nowadays, when you walk into a bank, almost everyone seems to have the title manager. I honestly am not sure who's in charge anymore, but when my granddad retired from the bank, which was one of his careers, there was only one person in the bank who had the rank of manager and had the title, and that was what he was. So yeah, that both him and my dad were very, very interested in woodwork and in doing a lot of work, shelving work and all sorts of things. And there's all sorts of parts of this house which they built. After it was built and sort of unfinished, they added in sections, and I've had to maintain them over the years. So I inherited their equipment, and I've done the work. Anyway, that's all off topic for tonight. Happy catching the Traders' Day to all in the UK. More books. Also, I have to be honest in that I didn't get away completely unscathed. You know, I have no bank balance, but I did manage to pick up a couple of steals, including a book about tribal class destroyers by Roskill. Terriers of the Fleet, a little book about the fighting trawlers. It was a very, very nice little store. Shipbuilder's Yarn, the biography of Sir Eustace Tennyson, which was good for today's project. And Mahan is Not Enough. The proceedings of a conference on the works of Sir Julian Corbett and Admiral Sir Herbert Richmond, edited by James Goldrick and John B. Hattendorf, and published by the Naval War College of the United States. What I find really fun when I'm looking at this picture is I'm fairly sure my professor, Dr. Andrew Lambert, has been drinking from the well of eternal youth because he looks exactly the same. And I am also fairly sure that Professor Eric Grove has also been drinking from the well of eternal youth because he also looks exactly the same. And yet I am told this took place in 1993, so 27 years ago. In Cal, respect to bank manager and nail gun. There is an old story that my grandfather once stopped an attempted robbery of his bank by walking out into the central area and staring at the gentleman who was trying to hold his tellers up and saying, "Excuse me, sir, might I be of service?" The guy turned round, looked at my grandfather, and decided to run out the building. He was a tall gentleman. Keen amateur boxer and cross-country runner. And also a keen various other things he did as well. Amateur dramatics. He did like to take part in plays occasionally. And was always happy to build the stages as well and all the stuff. And he's a good guy. Anyway, this is well off topic. Right then. So, image slideshow. Ships that Fisher scrapped, suggested by Geoff Grognard, or Jeff Beeler as he is on here. He has joined us this evening, so it's quite cool. And he has been offering also opinions already, so that's good. I do like to do this. This is not one of the patron suggested ones. This is one of the ones suggested, I think it was on Discord, Jeff, you suggested it. It might have been Twitter, but I think it was Discord. And I do like to go into Discord and pick up some of the ideas. Sometimes they're very close to the patron ones, in which case I include them in the patron vote. Sometimes they're different ones, and if I have the time and ability to do some extra research beyond that, what I'm already working on for other papers and articles, I pick them up and I do them. Do you know what? Yeah, that guy made the right call and leave. Probably. That was my grandfather, and that would have been in the 1950s. He did the confrontation. He was an interesting gentleman. A very, very nice guy. And he had the joy that my mum and aunt are twins, so he had twin little girls to be the father of, and he did quite a good job of them. They're good. Right, so the ships that Fisher scrapped, what we're looking at today. And these are cool. These are cool things, but, you know, Constantine, what did your grandfather do during the war? He had emphysema. So he was medically not able to go and serve in the armed forces. So he volunteered as a fire watcher and was on top of St. Paul's Cathedral pretty much every night other than the night she got bombed. So that's what he did in World War II. He couldn't go and serve on the front line, so he worked all day sorting out the banks, making sure everyone was looked after. At one point, having a shouting match with not a shouting match, a firm discussion is how he described it, with a gentleman who was trying to turf some people out of their homes because they hadn't paid their rent on time, and he reminded that gentleman that he was the manager of the bank which owned the mortgage on that property. In the middle of the war, because they wanted to let some Americans in and turf the British out of it, and he didn't. He supported the Americans coming over. He didn't see why the British family needed to be turfed out of their home, especially not when they paid their rent on time. And he knew they paid their rent on time because, as part of the mortgage deal, the bank kept a copy of the rent book. Anyway, so he was fire watcher on St. Paul's Cathedral. And of his brothers and brothers-in-law, 7 went off to war. 3 died flying for the Fleet Air Arm in various points of war, including one who was sunk on a merchant ship going out to India to join the fleet out there. They were attacked by a surface raider, and the last story we have of him is, well, we know where his body buried up, but the last story we have of him alive is him and his best friend manning a gun together and keeping up trying to maintain fire, even though he's a pilot, so trying to maintain fire going on from this gun to provide cover for the lifeboats going into the water as the German surface raider didn't stop engaging, even once they were launching lifeboats. Hello, Carl Harmon. Oh, and I do remember someone has tweeted me to ask me about my login detail, my name on World of Warships. It's Creswell of Afridi. Yes, it's named after the first captain of HMS Afridi and the first captain of the first tribal flotilla, or 4th destroyer flotilla as it became. Right. So, The Fisher experience. Let's look at this man before we start discounting all he's going to say and generally maligning him, or rather, not generally maligning him, but disagreeing with him. Let's consider what Admiral Fisher's service was like. He served on. This is him as a captain. He, of course, had spent many, many years in the Royal Navy prior to this. So, Admiral Fisher has a long career. He joined the Royal Navy in 1854. He wouldn't retire till 1911. So, that meant he spent 57 years in the service. And as you can see from this thing, he's his first command as a captain in 1874. So he'd been in service for 20 years when he got his captaincy. He got his command. He was 5 feet 7 inches tall. So a little bit shorter than me and Drac. But still slightly taller than Eric Winkle Brown. Born in Ceylon, but he doesn't spend a lot of time there. And honestly, he's a member of a large family, and he is sent off quite early, quite young, because they are poor, but they have connections with the Navy. So he's sent off the Navy, because Navy is a good career. It's a good trade. He managed to do quite well in the Royal Navy, and he becomes a noted torpedo expert and later on a noted gunnery expert. He spends 15 of his 25 years, 15 of 25 years of service, from 1862 onwards. So 1862 to about 1887. He spends 15 of the 25 years of service on 4 tours of duty at Portsmouth, concerned with either HMS Excellent or HMS Vernon in terms of gunnery and torpedoes. He is a noted expert on those. And as you can see from the rest of his career, he's also very, very experienced when it comes to the Admiralty by the time he gets to be First Sea Lord. He's done turns as Third Sea Lord, as Commander-in-Chief Portsmouth, as Second Sea Lord, and he's done all these things, and Director of Naval Ordnance, and Admiral Superintendent of Portsmouth. He has done a lot of work which is administrative and very experienced in terms of manoeuvring Whitehall. So, hello, Austin Harmon. He is a very, very well-read, very well self-educated man. He likes to read history books. He likes to engage in politics. He has liberal political views for the period. He believes in peace. It's also kind of interesting in that there are the ships he's officially posted to, which are the ones in thick, sort of the key ones on. But while he's officially posted those ships, he actually follows around people like Astley Cooper Key, who goes around multiple ships and takes his flag captain with him. De Hercules, Valorius, and Pallas. He does time on Duke of Wellington while he's waiting for HMS Inflexible, because Inflexible is supposed to be available, but it is not available. So you can't keep a full captain waiting around without a ship to command. That's not a captain's role. That would be beneath him. So he could keep very close to HMS Inflexible, he's put in charge of HMS Duke of Wellington. As Dan Freeman has just pointed out, his first ship was a wooden sail ship at sea. And he is an experienced officer. He's also one who's incredibly efficient in terms of how he trains his ships up. But he's also a bit of a prankster, a bit of an emotional person. There are all sorts of stories of him doing practical jokes on people, which are, some of them are not really that nice. There's an inventor who comes aboard one of his ships to test his new designed lamp. And basically, Fisher does extra effort to make sure it goes wrong at every opportunity. He then writes up the lamp as being an excellent development and thinks it's brilliant. But while the inventor's aboard, he basically tortures him by making everything that can go wrong, and that's a bit cruel. Commander of the Mediterranean Fleet, as Stephen Cross has pointed out, is a premier position. But also, so is the North American and West Indies Station, where he spent a lot of his time. These are positions which are considered, North American and West Indies Station is the position which is said to require a very good sailor, a very good sea captain to understand the turbulent weather. Whereas Mediterranean Fleet is a good fighting commander, but also a good politician. So both roles are very, very good. And mortal enemy of Lord Charles Beresford, but we can leave that to one side. Calvin Gasman, Dutch Clark and torpedoes. World War II G7A torpedo took 3,700 or so hours to build in 1939. Electric G70 is a 1,200 man hours. BFM 109. Calvin Gasman, I believe that's a continuation of something you've been discussing. You've been talking about at some point. He's a good commander. Soonros, I know he sent flags of plague and disease to Governor's house when requested to do by vision. That wasn't actually Governor's house. One of the hospitals sent a request for flags for a Queen's Day a Victoria's Day celebration, and he sends the yellow and black ones, which are plague and disease. So that's why they go that. There is some confusion, but it is a hospital he sends those to. So there is a bit of a reason for the humour, but still there's it's a bit of dark humour. It's Royal Navy humour. Covenant and torpedo manufacturing time. Just popped up with Admiral Fisher's torpedoes expertise. Ah. Well, yes, he did do a lot of torpedo time. He did do a lot of work in terms of making these things work. Sorry for spelling, lack of fast food. Don't worry. Fast food for you will arrive soon. Juno 19. Dark humour and Royal Navy. And there is the same thing. Yes, the Royal Navy does have a tradition of trolling. There's HMS President in the centre of London, which unashamedly invites the US ambassador to Thanksgiving or various other things every year. He took up dance, and the interesting thing about dancing with him is he takes it up as a form of exercise that a senior officer can be seen to do on a ship without it being problematic. Whereas he felt his traditional exercise of running and boxing and all the other things he couldn't really engage in as a senior officer. So he kept it going, and he was good. And the dancing was also very good for his politics and very good for his diplomacy, because he was much beloved by several prime ministers whose wives liked to dance when they didn't, and several members of the royal family who liked to dance, who the ladies liked to dance and the men didn't. Not just Queen Victoria, but her son and her grandson. Strub, do you think he was promoted past his capability? No. For the time, there wasn't anyone better than him. I think he was attempting to square a triangle, and that never really works. And I know the old saying is square a circle, but I like the phrase square a triangle, because in theory, if you have the right shaped triangle, you can put 2 of them in a square. But the thing is, that means you need double what you've got. Stephen Cross. He was also not cut in the mold of the older officers. Fisher would invite junior officers to talk and debate with him and expected them to challenge his points of view. True, but again, that actually wasn't that unusual. And when I said it wasn't unusual, he is flag captain under Sir Astley Cooper Key and Sir Leonard McClintock, who both also do that. So, whilst you can say there is a strong vein of officers, of senior officers, who don't do that, there is a strong vein of officers who do, and he's an example of that. So, actually, it's going to sound terrible to say this, but there is... Fisher comes from one side of the Navy, to an extent, and Beresford comes from the other. And Beresford is the leading candidate for that side. Fisher's the leading candidate for this side. And as they go up, basically, Beresford follows Fisher. But Fisher does a double time at the Admiralty, so Beresford times out. So Beresford can't follow Fisher. It's not that Beresford and Fisher really, really hate each other, although they do disagree on pretty much everything. It's that their styles are very different, but that's been okay because they're the two sides of the Navy and they followed each other up and they balance each other because as well as that, it's going to sound strange, but Fisher changes everything and likes to shake things up and make them new, which is great because you need that to improve and to bring in the new revolutions. But Beresford is very good at calming things down and organizing them. And if I was actually going to be in a war fleet, I would want Beresford in command, not Fisher. Fisher I'd want in the Admiralty, coming up with ideas and generally churning out good new ships and thinking about things. But in actual command of the fleet, I'd want Beresford, who was actually slightly calmer. And before you start to think of it, Fisher likes to talk to the junior officers, part of the reason because he's so often been involved in their training at Vernon. Beresford is more of a captain's discussion, so we'll have the captains over. So you can say actually Beresford is the one who's the heir of the band of brothers scenario of Nelson's day. Although Nelson would have invited the first lieutenants as well and all these things, it was very much the senior officers. In Beresford's time, it would be the captains and again, probably some of the commanders as well. So that's whereas Fisher liked to talk with the junior officers. They're both good methodologies. There is a different style, a different emphasis. Afternoon, Blue Shirt Butter. Jeff Elam. Freeman has a chapter on the Fisher Revolution in Victorian cruisers. His second paragraph explains why the slow tin-clad Orlandos were scrapped. I know he does, but let's take it this way. Freeman, who I have a lot of respect for, and probably if judging by some of the emails I get from him and then go back, he watches these videos occasionally, so I know he'll watch it and I'll say this. He draws his emphasis, well, probably he will, hopefully. Well, he draws his emphasis from the technical side of one aspect of them in terms of their aspect of operations in heavy seas, i.e. as you got in the North Sea and North Atlantic. And I would agree with him on that pure technical case. However, these ships had been working in the Indian Ocean and in China. And as I was pointing out when I was discussing them, I would have kept them for those roles so I could free up newer ships to operate closer to home for the battle fleet or to pursue the Asiatic squadron. But I will get into that, Jeff. Don't worry. And I do agree. Freeman makes some very good points. But again, this is the point of history. And it's one of the great things of history. If you study it close enough, you can usually use the same evidence to make a completely different point if you change the perspective on the evidence. Aston Hammond, what would it actually take to make a torpedo ram workable in the late 1890s? A lot of luck. And basically warspite level of plot armor. Deb Scott, Junior 109. He was much more politically savvy than Nelson. Okay, I know people were perfectly happy with him dancing with their wives. The wives are perfectly happy to tell the husbands to like him. Yep. As long as they didn't have to do the dancing themselves, they were happy to like him. Jeff B. Freeman has a... said that one. And Jeff Beeler, I would add that some of the reports that come in afterwards, after the Orlandos, kind of overstate these things to justify Fisher's getting rid of them. Fisher has his reasons, and I'll be getting into it. Okay? So why is Fisher cutting ships? And I have an example here, Warsprite, an Imperius-class armored cruiser. Now, they're fully rigged still. Why are they fully rigged? Not naturally because the engines are necessarily unreliable. This is the interesting thing. They often think is that they were rigged because they were unreliable. When you look at the actual Royal Navy accounts, the books, these ships are rigged not because the engines are unreliable, but because coal supplies are unreliable. But still, sailing them is not really sensible, and the Imperius-class armored cruisers also get cut. But why is he cutting ships? He needs to save money to stop politicians interfering in the Navy. That's one of the things. There are Haldane reforms and all sorts of things on the horizon for the Army as a result of the Boer War. The Navy is trying to avoid the politicians getting so deeply involved in naval affairs because they're worried this will cause them problems in terms of getting the technology and the stuff they need. Also, they think that once the politicians have control, they're not going to give it up, and that means they're going to be interfering lower and lower and lower down in the Navy and causing more and more problems. So he needs to save money. He also needs the money to invest in new technology, which means as he's not going to get more money, he needs to cut even more. And then you have his focus. His focus is very much on fighting a war against Germany. That is who he sees as a threat. If he thinks he's going to fight France and Russia, again, he's thinking about fighting them in European waters. He reckons in the nicest way, if he ends up in a war against Russia, he's going to have the Japanese on side. It's 1905. There is the Anglo-Russian alliance being walked on. The Anglo-Japanese alliance going on. And the Russo-Japanese war. So lots of things are going on. And he has his own ideas on ship design. Now, whilst Third Sea Lord, he has pushed some of these through, but he didn't really get to push through as much as he wanted to. Mainly because, well, this was a period of a great lot of technological innovation, but also it was a period of a lot of problems in terms of shipbuilders sometimes not listening to what they're being told to build, and still being bought. Why was it still bought? Because if the Navy created too much of problems, that arguments would get back to the politicians, which would cause trouble. So better to build it, accept it, either park it in the reserve fleet or scrap it early. Just on the grounds of new technology. And happy. Yes, this is why I've got a picture of HMS Warspite in full rig. In happy. As you said, Warspite had it for a short while, Imperius not. And they did get rid of the rig at some points and other things. But I wanted to put it in as a rig because that is also the traditional image you get of these ships. The traditional discussion is usually these were very old ships. They had this, that's why he's getting rid of them. He has reasons. But you notice at no point in that list have I mentioned age. Because there aren't any really ancient ships in the Royal Navy at this point. They've been doing a consistent building program since about 1870. And they've been getting rid of ships. Now, most ships serve about 30 to 40 years, so actually, there aren't really any ships which are that old. Vision. The Imperius class weren't rigged for long. Most photo I know. I was using it as a good picture to illustrate a point. Plus, it's called HMS Warspite. Come on. There are other ships which are rigged for longer, I do admit. But it's Warspite. Fisher was focused totally on Germany. Later, 1908, I think, he predicted war of Germany around 1914, when the canal was completed. That was what he was looking for. Ablaski. Also, Fisher freed train crews for his new ships. The new ships didn't come online as quickly as he got rid of the old ships. And quite a lot of the old ships were actually reserve ships he got rid of, not ships in service. There is a good example of that coming up. Steve Ross, didn't Fisher help soothe the government after the Russians shot up the fishing boats and basically urged against anything retaliatory? Yes, but that's more because he was banking on the Russian fleet being the other side of the world shortly. So that really didn't worry him. Carl Gosman, re-scrapping Orlando class. Was there an older, longer-range armor cruiser class which Admiral Fisher did not scrap? Calvin Gasberg, you know me so well. Dan Freeman, Fisher was appointed First Fleet Lord on 20th October 1904. The Dogger Bank incident happened overnight, on the 21st and 22nd of October 1904. Yeah, but he still had quite a lot of political things, contacts and power. In Happy, the Orlandos were the last iteration, in reduced size stuff, of old station battleship concept. I would call them armoured cruisers. That's what they were designed as, and that's what they're built as. There are many people who do draw the similarities, and there are some similarities in design emphasis, but they're armoured cruisers. But this isn't about the Orlando class. Remember, that was just for a taster. This is about why did Fisher cut the ships he did. Jeff Healer, Fisher's woodwork decisions are affected by the flaming cruisers of the 1894 Sino-Japanese and 1898 Spanish-American wars. Yes and no. It does serve him well, but there are some wooden ships which survive. Really do survive. Straub, Doctor, did Fisher understand all the new tech, or just thought the new equal better? No, he was a very passionate understander of the new tech, but very sure that new equals better. In Happy, sorry for the rig thing. No, sorry for the rig thing. But I do admit, I could have chosen better for the rig story a different class. But it's Warspite. Eskander, hello. I'm picturing a happy shipbuilder. I just want a freestyle, man. I need to express myself. To an extent, yes, that did actually happen. They were quite interesting to try and deal with, some of the shipbuilders. Hello, Jeffrey Indorf. Greetings to Ohio. In Happy, does the age thing hold? I mean, the Orlandos were built at the start of the time of very rapid technological changes in guns, armed propulsion. And they were sort of the last large ships built before the... Yes. Push DG for submarine developments. Yeah. Mm. Jeff Beeler, Fisher wanted to use effective intelligence of speedy ships to replace lots of ships. Strategy thwarted by the tendency to put the big, fast cruiser in the North Sea instead around the world. I would say, actually, right, in reality of Empire, the trouble is Fisher has a lovely idea. Using speedy ships and putting them around the world, putting them here and being able to send them around the world. The trouble is you can't do that. No, let me put it this. You can do that. Militarily, that's fine. Diplomatically, strategically, and in all other sense of times, that's absolute twaddle. I'm sorry. But you need, if you have your ships stationed all in Europe, and you're going to search them out from Europe, just look at how difficult it was in World War One for the Royal Navy to get any ships away from the Grand Fleet, even the Invincibles, when they go off hunting with Sturdy to hunt down Speer. There is a huge problem going. When Queen Elizabeth goes off to take part in the Dardanelles, there is a huge ruckus. Once you have your new ships, everyone wants these ships concentrated. Which is why the Royal Navy had always consistently operated a policy of, we have this generation ship in the home fleet and the Mediterranean fleet. We have the previous generation ships in the China station, the North America station, and down around Africa. And we have the previous generation to that ships in reserve. So if there's a big war, we can surge the reserves to the peaceful areas in the world, where they will probably deal with any surface raiders that come out. We can then send the second generation ships to back up this generation's ships wherever they need to be in the warry parts of the world. That was the idea. Fisher was turning it on the head. But to actually do that, he would actually have needed to build an entirely new fleet. He didn't have the time. He also didn't really have the inclination, because Fisher doesn't build present ships. He doesn't really get the concept of what a ship needs to do to be a present ship. He's interested in building ships to fight a war against Germany. He doesn't really build present ships. You know how you can tell this? Because of the ranges he gives his cruisers. Even his battleships and his larger ships, the ranges they have. And yes, there are reasons for this, but it means that they are not able to do the large presence missions. There is also a problem for the Royal Britain, in that it has a lot of the world it has to be present in. And you need ships out there to be present. If you don't have something there, you don't count. And Britain has to count, because it has all this empire to look after. Then there's the image. Yes, you can say those are old ships, they're not able to fight, or they're not as good as the modern ships. But if you see a sea of grey and a sea of white ships in front of you, at, let's say, a coronation review, the impact is enormous. Yes, some people who are naval specialists and naval officers will pick out which ships are the modern, really super fighting warships, but the whole impact of the entire sea will be very impressive and will have its bearing. You start cutting down those ships. And there's the trouble that, yes, you are replacing, let's say, a dozen not so good ships with 5 or 6 really good ships. But a ship can only be in one place at a time, and it still looks like you're cutting and looks like you're withdrawing and turning inwards from the world. And that is a problem when you're a global empire whose entire security is based on the deterrence, based on the image of you being world-conquering, world-stomping. So, what would I have done if I had been him? Well, I would have probably put more of these ships into reserve. That's where they're being put anyway. And I would have carried on building, and I would have not done it so quickly, the cutting. I would have had them going into reserve. Makes it helps sense. Now, the trouble is it's going to cost more. And this is why I say it's squaring a triangle. Because to do it properly, you need more money. And he, of course, had promised he wasn't going to ask for more money. So whatever we say about him having a strategy and all these things, and I think Fisher probably understood this, but Fisher was banking on having longer till war than he thought. He was talking about war in 1914 and all these things because it was good for getting funding. But he was banking on having longer before war and having more time to deter conflict and all these things. So he thought he had more time. The trouble is he didn't. None of us did. And that is the real problem. And this is why I point out in other parts, whenever you hear, it doesn't matter if the ships you're getting are better. Let's be honest, the Royal Navy, current Royal Navy, how many times are we told the Type 45s are worth 12 Type 42s? That's true. I admit, they are amazing compared to the Type 42. But we still only have 6 compared to 12. Is anyone going to sit there and honestly say that 6 Type 45s can be in the same amount of places in peacetime as 12 Type 42s? No. And the trouble is, peacetime is about presence. Waging war is about your military capability, about the war-fighting power of those ships. And I agree, from the war-fighting position, from this perspective, there is a huge logic of what Fisher's doing, and I support him completely. But from the presence peacetime fighting role, the psychological diplomatic role of warships and the duties they have, he couldn't have handled it any worse if he tried. And the thing is, I know he knows this because looking at his experience. If you go through his experience, he knows this. He's doing it because he has to for financial reasons. Was Russia really a naval threat after 1905? They're still there. Still there. It weakens them, but they build up afterwards. In Happy, what do you think? This is like the cost of ineffective modification and modernizations of 1865-1880 era ironclads in this respect of using older ships. I think they would have probably been quite a lot of them would have been got rid of, but they were sort of 3rd, 4th generation at this point back. James Grant, what thought was put into battlecruisers fighting battlecruisers? The dangers of not enough armor or speed. That's for a discussion after this, but honestly, the answer is always our ones have got to have more speed, bigger guns, longer range. Bruce Moreno, given that rigging is retained due to inconsistent gold supplies, is the other side of the coin low efficiency of contemporary engines and consequent short range? In some cases, yes, but the engines were getting better. Jeff Fisher doesn't build cute, fully rigged, yacht-like sloops and gunboats, some of the latter with modern Huns. Instead, he scraps them. That isn't what I'm talking about, present ships. So far, have I mentioned sloops or yachts? Nope. And sloops and yachts are useful. In the nicest way, I've been going over them in the 1920s and 30s. They are useful ships. I'm talking about the present ships in this period. Everyone crying for new ships. Yes, in 1917, the local commanders were crying for a couple of Sea or Arethusa class cruisers. In nicest way, if he was building those cruisers, if he'd been building slightly more of them, then you'd probably you need more cruisers than he basically gets built. Strub, do you think current governments are following Fisher's lead and want battle vessels and forget presence missions? I would argue the Type 31 is an attempt to get some presence missions, but I'm worried about it. And the River class both need to be upped in terms of numbers for presence. Dev Squad, how much of the arms race with Germany was a chicken and egg situation? Did the arms race happen because of Fisher, or did Fisher engage in the arms race that was already happening? It was already happening. Tirpitz was really far more keen kicking off than Fisher was. Dan Freeman, you are being very generous saying the RN has 6 Type 45s. I thought they had 4 and 2 laid up waiting for an engine fix. Well, 6 is what they have in total on paper. This is the trouble. Again, you have 2 laid up for engine fix. If we'd had built 7 or 8 or 9, and let's say we'd still had a third laid up, we'd still have 6 available, and we'd have 3 laid up. So this is the thing. C1, did he have anything to do with producing new air power? Seems World War II RN, Go Cut Down, was his fleet, but started with the World War I fleet. A little bit, but not really. To an extent, yes, the RN of World War II, but I would say the RN of World War II is more Henderson, which was more practical, in that Henderson was unashamedly building present ships while he was building a war fleet. So his idea was you had almost a 2-tier fleet. You had a present/escort fleet for convoy work and for presence in peacetime, and you had your war fighting corps for fighting battles and being the very big emphasis present ships. So it's a more thought out thing in a way. So I think the trouble is Fisher focuses on one side because he has to because of costs. Simon Lasky, having top-notch ships, though, also helps prestige deterrence. But totally agree, there's a balance needing to be struck. It does, but you have to remember again, who is the person who makes the decision to go to war? Is it the Admiral who realizes that your ships are so much better than their ships? Or is it the politician who's looking at just the sheer number of ships and going, wow, the British have just cut their numbers by 50%. Ooh, they're weaker. This is the trouble is... Again, you have to start thinking who makes the decisions and what are they thinking? What is their calculations? Politicians looking to see weakness, looking to see something which will give them a chance to get their piece of red on the map, will sometimes interpret the evidence as they wish it to be rather than the reality is. And in fact, more often than not, there is no group better at deceiving themselves than politicians as a rule when they are in charge. Website, warship strength is based on the root of the roof strength. 2 ships of strength 1 are strength 2. 1 ship of strength 2 is strength root 2. To an extent. Frederick, they are still there, but in UK mind, if the Japanese can do it, we can do it too and better. Frederick Cannon, there is a difference between seeing them on the news and seeing them turn up in harbour, though. That is the point. If you have ships, seeing the lovely pictures of brand new ships in the paper is one thing. Seeing the ships turn up to visit you is another thing. The primary role of the Coast Guard and the Coast Guard squadron of the Royal Navy and UK waters was not Coast Guard duties as you or I would understand them. They were to free up the home fleet, which would be off practicing for war and readying for war, the Atlantic Fleet, Home Fleet, whichever it's called at the time, while they would go on port visits to places like Copenhagen and Calais and various parts of Europe to go, hello, we're the British, we're here. We have so many ships. Your admirals know they have a fleet out there, but we're here to entertain you, have dinner, and chat. It's the presence mission. Fine. Excuse me a second. 2 bottles of fine brew. Yeah, by gum. Today's been a heavy iron brew day. Let's see. So, Inhappy, were the 6-inch guns on the Lanos upgraded to quick firing? Not during their service, but they could have been. There were others which had similar amounts which were. Dove Squad, Dan Freeman, how much were both countries acting on these, though? The Iron was already the largest navy in the world, and was the German Navy actually trying to match the Iron, or was it a political bluster? They were trying to build the risk fleet strategy, Derp Squad. So basically, they were trying to build enough that they would have enough ships that the Royal Navy couldn't afford to fight them, because if it lost enough ships, then other powers would be able to take it on. Basically, it's a psychological warfare game, but it works. Because for Britain, control of the sea, master of the sea is an absolute necessity for that empire. Jeff Beeler. German town-class cruisers were a threat. They were speedy, long-range 4.1 that could riddle an Orlando. Not really. You see, that's the idea they're the threat, but they're not really the threat. And if you're just focusing on the town-class cruisers, you're missing out all the rest. You're going, right then, what's going to happen is we're always going to see the best of the German matching up with the worst of ours. And that wasn't the case. And also, again, the German town-class cruisers maybe could do that, the 4.1 inch. Maybe. But you're talking about by 1914, 1915. Let's see, the German town-class cruisers, if I remember correctly, the Emden. Well, the Emden and her sisters only ships come into service in 1906. So, you're not cutting them because of that. And those are, yes, they're viable, but you also have your own cruisers which can counter them. These ships, what is their role? They're the secondary ships. They're kind of like using the pre-dreadnoughts to go off and do Gallipoli. Or protect the Channel Squad, or be the Travel Squadron. And be behind the minefield. They are force multipliers. It's the same with the older cruisers. Right. Jeff Biller, to me, big armoured cruisers, including Warren Myers, should have been overseas present ships, not with the Grand Fleet, especially 1914. That would have been lovely, but try and sustain them over that. That's the thing. It would have been good to have them out there, but they weren't going to be let go from the Grand Fleet because the Grand Fleet needed them to fight other cruisers, was their opinion, and other things. So, I would agree with you, Jeff. I would have done. But I'd also think you need more of those ships for that. Jennifer, surely the present ships in the Edwardian period would be the county-type cruiser or the Monmouth type. You don't have enough of them. This is going to sound strange. Okay, present ship. What is a present ship? Is the first question you should always ask. And we always, when we're talking about present ships, we tend to focus on the biggest. And if we're talking 1920s and 30s, we're talking about the big county-class cruisers. But the Royal Navy only has 15 of them, including Exeter and York. That's not a lot of them to go around the world and be your presence. It's the same in this period. If you're talking about the big cruisers, that's great. But how many stations does Britain have to be in? Again, we go back to this map. Britain has to be all across the world. It has to have presence in all those things. It has to have, yes, a flagship, which is what the Monmouths and what those other ships, older Candy class, can be used for. That's excellent. But it also has to have ships a level below that and ships below that to really maximize presence economically. Cheap and cheerful is what the lowest level is like. That's sloops, corvettes in this period, or things like the Pearl class we'll get into. All these things are there. And do they have a viable role in wartime? Probably it's not more than a light escort, but in peacetime, they are incredibly useful for maximizing your presence on the cheap. So that's where they come in. God's I totally would have had a hot mic moment if I ran a podcast YouTube channel. We all do. In Carl, role of First Sea Lord and responsibility for new build seems to have changed considerably between 1910 and 1930. Yes, but that depends on the Third Sea Lord how long they're in power. The Third Sea Lord has more power the longer they're in post. Jeffrey Enduff, the problem is always the balance between presence and warfighting ability. You need the presence, but the impact of having a presence ship being sunk because it lacks warfighting ability is bad. Yes. But honestly, that's not as bad as you'd think it is. Ships get lost in war and sunk in war. Everyone understands that. And if a brand new ship takes out an older ship, that's fine. What matters is you sink that ship yourself. I.e., losing Hood is bad. But if we consider the Battle of Coronel, yes, the Jones Trumpedet, does it damage the British position in East Asia? Does it damage the British position in South America? No. Why? Because the Battle of Falklands happens. And so everyone knows, oh yes, that Spee managed to win versus some older ships. Okay. And then Sturdy turns up and smashes up Spee. And it's just, okay. That happens. So you can get to, this doesn't mean you should keep ancient ships. Sailing around ancient as a Victory as a present ship wouldn't work. But again, we're getting off about the topic. Dan Freeman, Dr. Clark, the cruisers are the fourth rates of the steam plus steel area, not quite big enough to fight in the big fights. Too big to deploy everywhere? To an extent. I would say it depends. If you're talking steam area of the first and second class battleships, that's your first and second rates. And I would argue Ardent cruisers, depending on their size and form, are either the third or fourth rates. But again, you don't have enough that you want to deploy them everywhere in the world the whole time. Jeff Hiller, what were the advantages and disadvantages of scrapping the modernized ironclad battleships from Bellefonte to Nile and Trafalgar? Okay, this, I will say, is going to be focusing more on the cruisers. But the advantages of scrapping them was actually battleships, especially the older ironclad battleships, were incredibly labor-intensive. This is where actually Fisher does start to hold up weight in terms of scrapping them to save manpower. He does. The fact is, though, with the cruisers, most of the old cruisers you scrap use exactly the same number of manpower as the new cruisers. It just means you don't have as many cruisers for a couple of years. And even worse, most of those older cruisers were actually reserve ships, so it didn't matter. They weren't being actively crewed. They were just sitting in harbour waiting for reserves to practice on. In Happy, do modern ships suffer from optimization, i.e. 5% extra capability for 100% extra cost? Sometimes they do. Sometimes. And Carl, Empire Map 1905 should include much of the Caribbean. Yeah, I think it does, but it just doesn't show up at that scale. Dan Freeman, Dr. Black Swan names for Type 31s. I'd love it. We were actually discussing potential names for them. And our Refuser class keeps popping up as a potential set of source of names for them as well. In Card, there were still a lot of what are now considered obsolete ships in the RN during World War I, e.g. Cressy-class cruisers, Hogue and Abracad, all lost in one battle in 1914. Yes, there are. Derp Squad. Do the Type 45s have they put on a really grand dinner for dignitaries like the carriers battleships could? They do have some space, but you have to use basically the hangar. Type 31s are going to be better than that. They have quite a large space internally, which can be turned into many things and connected to the hangar to be a really big space. So let's look at the Orlando class. And here's one of the fun things. I'm going to start off by agreeing with Geoff that they do have a low freeboard in certain conditions. Now, what are these conditions? Before we start getting into Orlando class and what are their conditions. So, now, there is an interesting figure which goes around the Orlando class, which is forced draft. Now, in 1884, when they procured, the present board of gradually developing, and as I would say, venture, in an effective manner, our resources for the protection of commerce. The late board of Admiralty laid down an admiral type for the purpose in the Leander class. We have followed in their footsteps by producing the Mersey type, and we now propose to go a step further in the same direction by laying down vessels of the Mersey class, but protected by a belt in lieu of an armoured deck. The belt will, I think, be approved by my honourable friend who sits behind me, Sir Edward Reed. This was from the Secretary of the Admiralty. The belted cruisers are the Orlando class. Now, that's all nicely taken from a quote from Hansard, and the Secretary of the Admiralty at point is Sir Thomas Brassey. Interesting to read the Hansard one. If you guys want to go read it, I will put a link to it in here. And before anyone asks, yes, I was actually tipped off to that link, to that Hansard article by Wikipedia. But it proves my point. You go check the notes. Now, Jeff Bieler, Abaker, Cressy, and Hogue sending a squadron of armoured cruisers to do a sloop with a radio's job. Pretty much. Right then. So, but here's the thing if you go forward. From that particular quote. The creation of a torpedo flotilla having now become a necessity, and I may say a new necessity for the Navy, and deeming it our duty to avail ourselves of an opportunity of unusual character afforded by the condition of shipbuilding trade to strengthen the fleet and ships for the protection of commerce, we now propose to put out the contract in immediate order. Total amount which we ask Parliament to grant for shipbuilding to be executed by contract is 3,000,000 and 85,000, and we ask it as addition to the provision taken in the present estimates. This addition to the contract vote will be sufficient to produce 1 ironclad of the first class, 5 belted cruisers, 2 torpedo rams, 10 scouts, and 30 torpedo boats of the first class. We propose to order all these vessels as soon as the designs are prepared, with the exception of torpedo boats. With regard to torpedo boats, we propose to order 10 every year. We prefer to build this number every year rather than order a large number, and so deprive ourselves of the advantage of the improvements which are constantly being introduced. And the additional sum to be spent next year upon these new ships will be over £800,000. Now, sir, I will endeavour to give the House some details with regards to the types of ships we propose to build. The statement I propose to make is one which is always interesting to the House, and which I may say is always criticised with great ability. Our proposal is for an increased construction, embraces all the best types now represented in the Navy, and some new designs which we will trust will prove valuable additions to the fleet. I will take first the battleships. With regard to that class, we have always adhered to a policy of reasonable dimensions. Instead of advancing to the immense tonnage of the Italian ships, we have thus far adhered to the limit of 10,000 tons, with, I venture to say, highly advantageous results in rapidity of construction and in the number of ships which can be built for a given sum of money. We hold that the value of large ships is inevitably diminished in proportion as the power of the attack with a torpedo becomes more formidable. But, on the other hand, we recognise that the gun must still remain an essential arm of the Navy. And where heavy ordnance is carried, hydraulic machinery and mountings are required, and for the protection of vulnerable mechanisms, armour is indispensable. On this ground, and also on the grounds, more general grounds, large ships capable of carrying numerous crew and the seaworthy qualities and coal endurance necessary to seakeeping ship must always form part of the fleet of a great naval power. As soon as the designs are completed, we propose to lay down 2 first-class ships by contract and 2 in the dockyards. We shall thus have 15 ships in progress, 12 being of the first class. Of the 15, 6 are launched and in the completing stages. With regard to all of them, I desire to give an assurance to the House that I will proceed with it as rapidly as possible. And now, sir, I propose to give a more detailed description of the new armoured ships. The new armoured ships, the first series of 4, which we propose to lay down next year at Chatham, have a displacement of just over 10,000 tons. It's an interesting discussion. Anyway, please go look at that link and have a look at down there, because there is so much in there about them. So, there is a reason these ships are deployed to China and Pacific and Australia. That is the waters they were deployed for. If you're deploying them in the North Sea and North Atlantic, they are not going to perform as well, especially not in the force draft, where they are way down to be deeper. Okay, force draft means they're deeper, operating on a deeper time at this point. So that means that's why that affects their belt armor being too low and all these things. If they're fighting in the Pacific, they have a good belt armor for the Pacific. And again, yes, if you put them up against SMS Emden and they in 1915 and they have not had any improvements made in their fire control system and they haven't had their guns upgraded at all and everything's been left as it was built in 1888 or 1889, they're going to have trouble. But if you had made those reasonable changes, you would probably find yourselves having capable ships, which could do a lot of damage, could deter them. Okay, and now there's a reason I'm going to use this phrase deter. Because as I keep mentioning, I keep using the description of saying these could be the convoy protection ships to free up your modern ships to go hunting. Why is this a deterrent? Because as we've been over before with a surface raider, a surface raider beats you. That's great. But a surface raider has to expend ammunition to beat you, which it doesn't have any supply of. And that surface raider also runs the risk of getting damaged itself. Now, if I'm the SMS Emden and I'm dealing with even a half-modernized 9.2-inch gun, couple of them on these ships, and yes, they have some quick-firing 6-inch guns. Well, if I'm getting any damage from that, I'm in trouble. Because a 9.2-inch gun, that shell could well punch through one of my less armoured areas and cause tremendous amount of damage internally. And I'm not going to get it repaired anyway. So my choice is, yes, I can win that fight, but at what cost? or I can choose not to fight and go somewhere else. So that convoy's left unharmed and undamaged. And again, at 10 knots, yes, that's not fast enough for the battle fleet. I agree, that is nowhere near fast enough for the battle fleet at the time. But for plodding along with a merchant convoy, that's okay. 480 crew. Well, again, if you've modernized it, you've got 480 personnel, and that's a ship you don't have to replace for those duties by building it. You can use a new ship for something else. And as we've been over, in World War I, the Royal Navy is about 400,000 personnel. In World War II, it's about 800,000. I.e., it's not as big as it could be, but it's big enough for the job. Do I think these ships would have been still in service in 1916? Probably not if they'd been in service in 1914. And before Geoff has just pointed out, Geoff Beeler, you don't hunt surface raiders, you convoy and escort their targets. Well, that is not entirely what you do. You convoy their targets, yes, but you also have hunting groups to hunt them down. That's how you deal with things like the Graf Spee, etc. So you have a two-tier approach. And if you get close enough, you get spotted by the convoy, then they radio out and your presence is revealed to the hunting ships which are coming to hunt you down. Because in the nicest way, the British would prefer there to be no surface raiders out there. And if the surface raiders are avoiding convoys, that's great. Your main critical ships will be protected by convoys. But there'll still be surface raiders out there hunting down lone ships which still wander around, and you need to take them out. So, you know, this is the thing. And also, and I would point out that in the 1904, 1905, the Royal Navy really isn't making the case for convoys. That takes Henderson in 1917 with the backing of Jellicoe. Now, here's the point, though. One of the key reasons the Royal Navy argues against convoys in the earlier part of World War II is they do not have enough ships to escort those convoys and man the Grand Fleet. So that is the case, and then it's only when later, when they've built up ships, enough ships, and they can start making the case for it, that they can start to convoy again. It's kind of like the same scenario the American Navy finds itself at the beginning of World War II. We'd love to convoy ships, but we're going to pretend we can't, we don't think we need to, because we don't have enough ships to do that job. It's the same with the Royal Navy, which has as many ships as it does, but still doesn't have enough to do the convoy work. That's good. I don't mind you taking the mickey of that typo of Coast Guard. It's quite funny. I'm still laughing about it. As I said, and I changed the earlier one to have Coast Guard in its title. Geoff Elam, the old Landers did have 6-inch quick-firing guns. Best attribute. Yes, they did. But they'd have had better ones by 1914. Even if they'd been fit in reserve. Zinkit, with no World War I, how long before the last of the big armoured cruisers would have been withdrawn and scrapped? 1916-18? Probably you're talking about 1920s. Honestly. You're talking, in fact, some of these ships we're going to be talking about in the protected cruisers country do make it to 1920. In Carr, there was no plan or desire to introduce merchant ship convoys by the RN in 1914, as I understand it. I think I've just covered part of the reason for that, a large reason for that. Frederick Vega, it's like the Greek armoured cruiser that was used as a convoy escort in World War II. Too old for the battle fleet, but perfect for convoy escort. Yes. Something big and scary to deter raiders. Sure, Mac, you mean Fisher? I hopefully I said Fisher, but Henderson does come into this as well, because believe it or not, he's his uncles are wandering around at this point and heavily involved in various things going on. Considerados, finally someone explains effectively why the convoy system was so slow to go into effect. Yeah, it's basically the biggest argument against convoy system that comes out of the Royal Navy is not that we don't want to do the convoys, it's that we don't have enough destroyers and cruisers to adequately do our patrol duties to enforce the blockade and protect the Grand Fleet and do the required operations in the Mediterranean to deal with the Turkish and, well, the Ottomans and all the rest of the world, and also escort convoys. That's the point. Yes, the largest navy in the world wasn't big enough to do all the things it was being asked to do. And that's one of the reasons why I say he is making a great war fighting decision in terms of fighting the battles, fighting the war, cool, but he's terrible in terms of presence and terrible in terms of this sort of escort warfare, this other duties which go into it. Calvin Gasford, recon with protection. Having to assign at least an old 15-inch battleship to escort it to each convoy, as long as the Shah North and around World War II, or as long as it was expensive. Yeah. Which is why whenever they came out, there was hunting groups going, we're coming to track you down. Jeff Phillip, the Orlandos could have been the R-class of early World War I. That's pretty much what I'm talking about. That's what they would have been. I don't think they'd have been around for long of World War I, but honestly, I would prefer to have had them available when I had the personnel for them. Because, again, we say the Royal Navy doesn't have the personnel for these ships. They form an entire division for the Western Front. They have all sorts of other sailors put ashore to do these things. And these are reservists who normally would have been aboard such ships like this, doing the commerce protection role around the world. So, again, they would have been useful to have. Calm commerce protection. So, it is cheaper to hunt them down, both in coal, oil, and sweat and blood. Yes, pretty much. That's good. Though with a different, more academic accepted title, would the trolling escapades of the Royal Navy be a worthwhile history master's thesis? Yes, it could be. How the Royal Navy engages in psychological domination throughout the ages. Yeah. Jeff Taylor, the Orlandos could have gone with an quick-firing 6-inch armament and still been very effective. And that would have probably dealt with their issue in high seas of having the 9.2 inches, which is one of the reasons why the weight of those, which is one of the reasons which dropped them down in the water. So yeah, they could have gone out. They might have even been able to take one of the early double 6-inch turrets on the front in space of 9.2s. Shomak, for convoys in two hemispheres, no, which is why the US tries to cheap out where they can, i.e. the East Coast, and it ends poorly. Danfrim, the anti-convoy World War I is the same as that used by Admiral King in early World War II. Still not sure it's correct, and operational research says it isn't. It isn't, but it's basically we don't have enough ships. And you have the problem that if you convoy the convoys, if you do take the ships off and convoy the convoys, and you're not convoying the battle fleet, and the battle fleet gets sunk by a submarine, then you're in a really big trouble. Or you don't have to worry about surface raiders so much in that scenario, but submarines still matter. But again, in the early part of World War I, surface raiders. Again, in the early part of World War II, surface raiders. So that's where you have to worry about more on those distant places. And again, where would I prefer Aboukir, Creasy, and Hogue? I would prefer them being surface raiders. I would prefer sloops doing that job, and those three off with things like Orlando class, off sitting in the Indian Ocean or South Atlantic doing convoy protection for convoys to avoid, so they don't get surface raiders don't attack them. And before, also, again, one of the things I'd like to point out about convoys is there's often this argument that the Royal Navy doesn't do convoys in World War I, doesn't have an idea for convoys. Look at the troop ship convoys and the various war armaments convoys, which actually start to take place even at the beginning of World War I, where they're bringing Australians and New Zealanders from all over the world. And there are battle cruisers, i.e. HMAS Australia, HMS New Zealand, etc., which go out to escort the troop ships home and make sure that convoy is looked after. The Royal Navy has a doctrine of convoys. It's just not implementing it because it doesn't think it has enough ships, and it doesn't. Derp Squad. In a war in the current era, would maritime trade be effectively shut down by the smaller number of escort-type ships and increased capabilities of submarines? Yes, but I don't think it'd be the submarines which would be doing the shutting down, because the submarines are increasingly great, but they still run out of torpedoes. And they can't exactly surface and start engaging with a deck gun. So they have far more limited armaments. No, the thing you're going to worry about in a modern war would be a mothership with a whole load of swarm boats to go and attack things. Something cheap, cheerful that drops off a whole load of explosives. Or mines. Mines would be fun as well. Hi, John South. Dan Freeman, Iron Manpower Agreement doesn't hold water, pardon the fun, in wartime, but in peacetime? In peacetime, those ships were in reserve. And it was for reservist manpower, and they had a lot of that as well. Does Vanderbilt, you see the same with the escorting to a specific point, but from halfway over the Atlantic? They're on their own, no escorting. The escorting picked up incoming convoy and turned around. Yeah. Jeff, oddly, I wonder why HMS Australia was no station in Australia. HMS Australia, I have no idea why she wasn't. It does seem to me. Interesting enough, Leander class, which were actually older, less capable than the class we talked about, the Orlando class. HMS Leander is still in service in finally gets decommissioned in 1920 and serves the whole way through World War I. Guess where? On distant stations and doing all sorts of random things. Voila. Leander herself, and that was the interesting thing was I went into the thing and actually said the Orlandos are improved Leanders in that example from Hansard. That's exactly how they're described, and yet Fisher managed to cut all the Orlandos, but one of the Leander class remains. The one which wasn't in reserve. So I think actually the big thing he cuts is the ships which are in reserve, i.e. the ones which people won't notice. And the trouble is with cutting the reserve ships is that is your backup. That is your escorts. That is your replacement ships, your force multipliers for wartime. We don't have enough ships, but we won't admit it, so we'll call it useless. Yep. Dan Freeman, convoys, even without escort, take up much less ocean, so chances of spotting are about the same between single ships and a whole convoy. And the U-boat versus a convoy, not going to be 100%, but against single ships, they can easily nibble away. Yeah. Sure, submarines change the equation quite dramatically. They do, but they also don't. In that they do, but we also have to remember HMS Dreadnought managed to sink. The only ship she sunk in anger during World War II, during World War I, when she was a service, was a submarine. So, these ships could also ram a submarine quite well if they caught it. Submarines aren't exactly fast at this point, and they are more submersible torpedo ambushing vessels than they are the submersible torpedo boats of World War II or the submarines as we understand it today. So in Kipps, determined to cut surface escorts, Knott's 1981 defense review came to the same conclusion. No need for convoys, will fast-track individual ships across the Atlantic along safe corridors. Yeah. Knott's review. It's off topic. Right. So I found out, problem with convoys is for surface raiders. They are ideal targets if unescorted. For submarines, it's the other way around. So the influences decisions too, especially fast convoys with some guns. I.e., if you have a convoy motoring along at about 8-9 knots, and you had one of these along with it, that would make it slightly more problematic for a submarine to engage. They'd have to concentrate on a torpedo attack. And then again, submarines don't carry as many torpedoes as they carry shells. They aren't able to take out as many targets with the torpedoes. Plus, torpedoes are in no way as accurate in World War One as they are in World War Two. Not saying they're that accurate in World War Two, but you know. Andrew Cox, good evening. Joe, how this reserve escort force presence would influence Spade decisions in the Battle of Cornell? Well, let's put it the other way. So, one of the troubles that the British have is getting at the Battle of Cornell is getting. I forgot his name, and I'm not going to get it wrong. I'm going to get it right. Look up the Battle of Cornell details. Craddock. There are enough ships. Okay, Craddock doesn't have enough ships. Why doesn't he have enough ships? Because the Royal Navy is very short on its modern ships. Why? Because the modern ships are having to do jobs which traditionally would have been done at this point in the war by the older ships. I.e., they're having to do patrols of booms. They're having to do things like Albuquerque, Hogan, Creasy are doing. They're having all these things. The smaller present ships have been lost. The older ships have been got rid of. And because of this lesser number of ships, you've got the newer ships are having to do much more. And they're sort of being overwhelmed. Whereas if you'd had more of these ships around and reserves, you'd actually had been able to more likely send Craddock more ships in the first place. So let's say Craddock might have not had a much better force, but he might have had 2 or 3 armoured cruisers. He might have had 2 or 3 light cruisers. He might have had another auxiliary cruiser. And that might have meant that actually Cornell ends up being won by Craddock, because the whole thing is Spey can do it as long as he can outmatch Craddock. He outranges him, and therefore he can beat him. But if he doesn't outnumber him, if he cannot outrange him because, let's say, Craddock has the 2 armoured cruisers he gets are 2 slightly more modern vessels. Let's say instead of Monmouth class, they have, I don't know, a Devonshire class or even a Duke of Edinburgh class with them, then he has problems. You know, if you have Duke of Edinburgh or Black Prince able to be with you, that is a big problem for Spey. That's good. That's luck. Something like a fast freighter with a few close-in weapon systems attached. And Marines trained to attack limpet mines? Probably. Something like that. Constraints. Doing research on the Empire patrol ships is a huge pain. The sources are incredibly hard to identify and find. Yep. But same as the Olympic class cruise liner. Same kill count as HMS Dreadnought. Yeah. 1 submarine. Does Leander have a full set of sails? Andrew Cox. As they originally built. Yes, they did. Dirt Squad. How would a torpedo trigger device in 1-1? Better or worse than Mark 14? Well, the Mark 14 is the measure by which all are compared and found better. But Are they? Let's put it this way: they're not near, and they're not as good as the American and British ones get to by the end of World War II by a long way. Cal Geisberg, Poppy or fireworks in the background? Fireworks. So you went, Dan Freeman. Yes, forget the benefits of info. Also, probably in the Navy too. Like there are a lot of sailors from Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam on US ships today. Yes, and there's all sorts of things in the Royal Navy in this period. Jeff Ealer, the two Leanders in World War I are both depot ships. They end up being used as depot ships, but actually HMS Leander does all sorts of other weird things as well at some points. Considering the whole anecdote where Craddock was wearing a medal given to him by the Kaiser in uniform that he could not take off was rather amusing. Ryan Cash, good evening. Was the loss of the Abacare, Crecy, and Heeg a much more serious loss on the strategic level than people generally think then? I would argue yes, because it's how soon can you replace them? The thing is, it's one of those issues is... Okay. So when we're talking about the Battle of Jutland, one of the things that's often pointed out is that the British managed to replace their losses far quicker because they're already in construction than the Germans managed to repair their damage and replace and repair, and they get everything back. And so, frankly, for the British, the damage done proportionally doesn't cause them much trouble. But the thing is, nothing soaks up cruiser numbers and escort numbers like a war does. Okay, your battle fleet is critical, yes, and numbers of battleships or aircraft carriers or whatever it is at the time that you need are always important. But there is not a single admiral in history, there is not a single commander in history who has at any point turned around and said, I have enough frigates, or I have enough cruisers, or I have enough destroyers. At any point. Cunningham would have loved 4 or 5 battleships in the Mediterranean, but he was quite happy to settle for 3. It was quite enough if he needed to do the job. He'd have loved 2 or 3 aircraft carriers, but if he only could have 1, he would quite happy to it. However, pretty much every week he sends letters home to the Admiralty complaining about his lack of cruisers and his lack of destroyers. Every week, without fail. Why? Because you always need them for more jobs. And the thing is, why do the British have 200 odd destroyers and all sorts of other things at the beginning of World War II? Why don't they have enough? Ships, I would argue, because their actual reserve numbers of cruisers and reserve numbers of destroyers are actually quite low. Again, this is thanks to the treaty system, whereas in World War I, it's thanks to the Fisher system. If Britain had been able to, they would have probably quite happily kept the older C-class around, rather than scrapping them when they did. Not because they were great ships or because their engines had suddenly got more life in them and they were going to be doing super fast jobs, but actually because you could do a pretty similar conversion to those ships as you did to the V&Ws, not too costly because of where they had their armor, and you could have a long-range escort, which would be quite useful. Good evening, Thomas Van der Wey. Jeff Ealer, if Craddock had Canopus, that is a problem for space, something he did not seem to realise. From Glasgow to Toronto, he already had a wide variety of speeds. Yes, but also Canopus has its own issues with its chief engineer and various things going on, so Canopus... It would be very nice to have on paper, and it would still... Spee would have probably avoided fight then and just gone straight past, but then, of course, you might have ended up with something happening to the Falklands. Dan Freeman. Dr. Clark Rowan Crash. Was the loss of Abigail Crazy Hogue due to them being at sea, partly to get sea time experience rather than as a tactical need? No, it was more a case of they were in the wrong place at the wrong time and really shouldn't have been there. Read letters every week from more DDDs. Same World 1. Down to drifters in the Tranto barrage. Yeah. Ah, meet the Mersey class. Now, this is another thing these ships get used as. Depot ships. Why does that doesn't matter? Well, it's useful. It's useful to have a depot ship for your submarines, for your destroyers as they're coming in. It gives you more space to store these things and look after them. And actually, the older ships tend to be better as depot ships than some of the newer ships. Why? Because they have less subdivision, which makes them less good at taking damage, but makes them great for storing stuff. I mean, it's just brilliant. So this is HMS Thames, which ends up becoming the South African trading ship General Buffer, and actually ends up serving in World War II as a prison ship. King's Rook. So Canada should have been building 100 tribals in lead up World War II. As much as I'd love to say that, no. I would say Canada, if they had been building an all-destroyer force prior to World War II, 24 tribals and about... Um, 80? No. Let's go for 72, but that makes a nice 96. 72 other destroyers, probably of the J type, would have been good. Again, second bottle of Iron Brew a day. Back in a second. Right then. So, the way you see on escorts at Thomas Manuel, the way you see on escorts at the start of World War II, when you read the first-hand accounts of those poor corvette crews, shells growing everywhere, not enough time to get them off. The wear is huge. Yep. Ron Cash, I know an ex-Second Sea Lord, and he curses the new QE class as vanity projects and always says we need more similar ships. I think I finally understand why. Thank you the fog is cleared. Now, here's the point. I would say you do need the Queen Elizabeth class. Because if you remember when I talk about present ships, I go it as a graduated present. So your forward present ships work great as long as everyone knows there's a big bad sitting behind them. And the biggest bad you can build at the moment is an aircraft carrier. So that's what you have up. That's what you have the Queen Elizabeth for. But the trouble is the way that governments have gone right then, because you're getting the aircraft carriers, because of the warfighting capability they bring, we're going to cut escort numbers. And that's completely the wrong way around, because you should go, right, that gives us warfighting capability. What gives us peacefighting capability? And I would argue for an increased role of reserves and all sorts of things, because sometimes warfighting capability, you can maintain it with having half those ships in regular and a kernel of the ships in reserve and just rotating them out of reserve and into regular to keep those ships in fighting trim, but having the second crew, the second ship, or the other ship, being a reservist ship, with reserves to come in. And again, I would argue with the Queen Elizabeth class, I'd actually like 3. But I'd also argue I'd like a lot more Type 45s, I'd have liked a lot more Type 26, and I'd like a really lot more Type 31s. Why? Because the Type 31s are my forward presence ships. And I'd also like it all to be divisible by rule of 3. My idea is if you have 6 Type 45s, so you're going to divide it around, I'd argue you need 2 Type 45s for every escort group. Okay, that means that's 3 escort groups. How many Type 26s do I need per escort group? Probably 3 to protect a carrier battle group or amphibious task group. So I would go down, right, and I need 9 of those. Right, where are my presence missions? How many presence bases am I going to have? How many ships do I need to man those presence missions? How many ships do I need at home to maintain those presence forward in terms of churning out crews and all these things? I probably end up with 12. 4 based in the UK and 8 based in 4 pairs around the world of Type 31s. But that's me sitting there working and thinking about, right then, warfighting capability, peacefighting capability. The two complement each other, because if you have a strong warfighting capability, that gives your peacefighting capability a firm foundation to build from. And if you have a very capable peacefighting capability, that means your warfighting capability can concentrate on preparing and being ready for war, so that they reinforce each other and mutually supportive. But oftentimes they're spread around. And this is a thing I'm going back to with Fisher. Fisher is making decisions he's doing because he's worried about warfighting capability. And he's not got enough money to do both. And I think he knows this. I think he will say pretty everything up with a lot of pretty words. But I don't know how much of that is him making the case after the fact or him actually believing it. And I don't think he does believe it because he's a smart guy. Geoff Grognard, Canada adopted the Orphan Sea class in a leader, so that had almost a full flotilla of more modern destroyers than the Anzacs. Recognition that ASW was probably going to be the RCN wartime role. Yeah. Calvin, what's his opinion on our nuclear deterrent, Admiral Cash? Admiral Cash, deterrent is a must. I love the Queen Elizabeth class, so talk to him about them. Wow, he was not a fan. Yeah. See, I am a fan, but as I said, I explain it, and I would also like 3 LHDs. And as you know, I've often told you about my idea is you have the LHDs which have ski ramps on, and therefore you can multiply between the two groups. So the same air group can operate from all 5 ships in different configurations depending on what they're doing, and that gives you guaranteed air strike capability, gives you guaranteed amphibious lift capability, and gives you guaranteed amphibious assault capability, and all those things matter. But that's me. Again, there is a whole video on this, which is my thing about the Royal Navy I would build if I was in charge. Sealing not sort of like HMS Centurion disguised the KGV and then anchors to Mulberry Harbour at Normandy. Obsolete does not mean useless, just repurposed. Yeah. So, let's go to the next class. I want to talk about yes, the Apollo class, second class protected cruiser. And here's an interesting stat about the Apollo class. Right then. So, the Apollo class are very, very small. Now, there are 21 of these vessels built under the 1889 Defence Act, Naval Defence Act. And there are 8 further built to the Astrea class, which is a slightly modified version of them. Okay? So, they are built in 1889. They're ordered in. And they are protected cruisers above the second class type. They displace 3,600 tons. They have a top speed of 19.75 knots, so roughly 20 knots. Their complement is roughly 300. Their armament is 2 6-inch quick-firing guns, 6 4.7-inch quick-firing guns, 8 6-pounder guns, and between 2 and 4 14-inch torpedo tubes. And this is the Apollo class. Now, what's interesting is that Sybil's wrecked in 1901, but Scylla, Terpsichore, Tribune, Aeolus, Indefatigable, and Retribution and Peak are all broken up in roughly 1911 to 1914 period. The rest served the whole way through World War II. What do they serve as? Well, they were some were converted into block ships to scuttle the entrances to enemy-occupied ports in Belgium. Others were expended in the raid on Zeebrugge. Others took part in Ostend. And the rest of them were used as patrol ships, as present ships, as mine-laying cruisers. In fact, Latona, Apollo, Intrepid, Infelia, Andromache, Naid, and Thetis were all converted into mine-laying cruisers in 1907, and they were used as that during World War I. They were very useful ships. The Astrea class, slightly bigger, all coming in with 4 18-inch torpedo tubes, slightly more armor, and they're good. They're again used. They're all... Forte is the only one sold in 1914. The fact that the Royal Navy was selling off ships in 1914 is always something I find quite disturbing. But again, these ships were used in World War II, were used in World War I, and used very well. Second-class protected cruisers. They are effective ships. They're useful ships. They are not much younger, not much, definitely not better than the Orlando class. They use 300 crews and are not exactly light in terms of manning, and yet they survive. Why do they survive? Mostly because they're far enough down the list that no one really notices them. These are the smallest of the smallest, the lowest of the low, in terms of the cruiser terms. And they use, well, not quite the smallest of the smallest, the lowest of the low, but they are very effective in what they're used for. So, would I want to take these into a fight if I was taking them to Jutland? No way. I would not be on them in anywhere near Jutland. But for all the roles they do, they are actually very useful and very critical. And they saved the Royal Navy. Okay, if you can reuse an old ship for a role, it saves you in 3 ways. 1, it allows you to use that slip space that you were going to use to build its replacement for building something else. 2, it provides you with options. If the worst comes to the worst, you have those hulls. Hulls are far more difficult to build and make work than anything else. If necessary, you can turn those hulls into floating AA defense ships or all sorts of things, as happens with various cruisers in World War II. And free. This is the important part. It gives you options in terms of presence, because it's still technically a warship, and it looks war-y enough and fighty enough that if you need to send it somewhere as presence while your main ships are off fighting a frickin' war, you can do it, and they'll turn up and they'll look okay. Oh, Richard, were the Apollos considered Ellswick designs? Not really. They're a bit small for Ellswick designs, but they are close enough to close to them. Geoff Grognard, the Apollo class semi-submersible cruisers featuring HMCS Rainbow, protector of Vancouver from mutinous Sikhs. Vision, the Apollo class are small. I had one for breakfast this morning with cornflakes. So wash it down with some Lando class juice. Okay. JP, I wonder if some of these scrappings were due to worn-out, inefficient boilers and machinery. I would love to say that was that logic going through, but I've gone through and some of the ships scrapped had actually had new boilers fitted not that long before they were scrapped. That's part of some of the problems when looking at them. Basically, it seems to me the ships which were already in reserve were the ones which were scrapped. No matter how recently they've been in. If they were actually doing service, Fisher didn't want to announce that he was withdrawing ships, if he could avoid it. That's what Draconel decides to text call Dr. Lau while he's streaming to remind him to keep his phone on silent. Actually, no. It wasn't Draconel. As much as I love Drac, he is a great guy. It was someone I love slightly more. The message finally coming through. And who... Yeah, I'm not going into more detail, but thank you. William Cox, certain Japanese battleships were famous for use as AA hulks in World War II. Yeah. C1, USN overbuilt numbers of destroyers in post-World War I, some as fast as banana boat. Then others served as tenders of subs, seaplanes, patrol ships. Aaron, you used even one as a giant torpedo into a dock. Well, you know, you have to do something with it. Dan Freeman and Dr. Clark and Drac are worryingly in sync. They probably can just know the other needs a technical point of obscure history answering and message each other the solution. Love to say that hasn't happened. It's sometimes the case that one of us will go, oh, look at this information I just found. Oh, I was just looking for that. It does happen. Dan Fisher's plan to hide ships taken out of service is smart, but could have been reversed, so put older ships in reserve to reduce costs. Yes. That's what I would have been doing. I'd have been putting ships into actual things. And actually, I have to apologize. There aren't as many ships as I was hoping to put in here, but that's literally because the slides grew very, very complicated. And More than that, I was having a long phone conversation arguing about someone paying me. Hopefully they're actually going to pay me. Because they owe me the money. Because I did the work. Months ago. Alright, Fisher's plan to hide ships taken out of the... No, I'm not arguing anything. There's argument enough's going on in the world. Just stating facts there. It would cost dozens, billions to break down half the world's warheads. Oh, God, don't get me started on nuclear warhead decommissioning. Oh, that's just so expensive. It's cheaper to just fire them into space, but we shouldn't do that because of the environmental damage it would cause. Wilcox, nuclear power proves the us versus them lie. The team working to decommission Soviet airships' reactors is heavily represented by USA tech people. Yes. Right. Meet the Pearl class. Third class protected cruisers. Third class cruisers. They're just cute. Don't be nasty about the Pearl class. They are just cute. They literally are. They're 2,575 tons. So, for your own perspective, they weigh only 300 tons more than a Batch 2 River class. So your choice is you can have a Batch 2 River class or a Pearl class cruiser. I know, we'd actually have the River class these days, but let me live my dream of having some fun. Although, actually, if I could put the engines for a modern River class inside a Pearl class cruiser, I could be a very happy man. Or redesign it modernly. Ooh. So cute. They had a... Okay, so... Pallas was sold in 1906. And before anyone asks, HMS Pallas was... not the ship, I think, which actually ended up serving... which was the one after the ship, which... Fisher commanded. Pandora, renamed HMS Katoomba, was sold for scrap in 1906. Pearl, scrapped in 1906. Pelorus, later Midura, scrapped in 1906. Persian, renamed HMS Wallaroo, and then HMS Wellington, changed back to the original name Persian in 1920 before being sold for scrap. Managed to serve for quite a long time. Let's see. Philomel was transferred to the Royal New Zealand Navy in 1914, sold in 1947 and scuttled in 1949. Phoenix became Tarunga, scrapped in 1906. Psyche became Ringmora, scrapped in 1906. And, yeah. They're just cute. They have 8 quick-firing 4.7-inch guns, 8 quick-firing 3-pounder guns, 4 machine guns, 2 14-inch torpedo tubes. They have 2 3-cylinder triple-expansion steam engines being powered by 4 double-ended cylindrical boilers and driving 2 screws. They have 7,500 installed horsepower on forced draft. Or indicated horsepower and forced draft. Ay, caramba. They're cute! Jeff be like, Wateroo! Down here, the Pearl class look tiny. There you are! Oh. Run cash. Well, I know. No. Dirt Squad. This looks significantly smaller than a destroyer. Let's put it this way. If you were in a tribal class destroyer, you might well be able to ram one of these things and come out okay. Dan, I was going to ask about whether or not you want to be coaling up the Pearl class. That's why I'm changing their engines. Fucking it. Two of the greatest lives in history. Of course, I respect you. And the immortal checks in the post. Yeah. Abelowski, have to disagree. Blackburn is much more cute. Oh, goodness me. Oh, I don't know. Blackburn. All hail the Blackburn. At a certain point, I'm going to give it enjoying this veneration cult, but at the moment, I'm going to try and avoid it. Vision, I'm always looking for lost Pearl class cruisers on the floor at work. Vacuum dreadnought hoovering them up. JPDT19. Hello. On the subject of Canada, I've been using it understood why she was on the Chatham Destroyer Memorial lost. Not exactly. Viking funeral more adapt, but her crew and memorial deserve it. I know. There are certain things which are kind of interesting in some memorials of what's remembered. Bucky me, what was the livability of these Pearl class cruisers? Don't ask. You really don't want to be. But, you know, it's quite interesting to look at their armor belt and how they were armored. They're very much sloops. I would argue that these third class cruisers are actually sloops. But, you know. Thomas Randall, okay, I must admit, I really like these pearls. Ooh, triple expansion. They're nice little ships. I wouldn't have wanted to be on one in war, but in peacetime, I'd have happily been the commander of one, pottling around the distant oceans of the world, going, "Hello, have you met the 4.7-inch gun? Are you going to behave yourselves and be nice to Britain? Good." Eamon, could you put a modern radar on the Pearl class? With all their guns, they would make great present ships today. You could probably put a modern radar on it. It's big enough to put some sort of radar on it. Again, river class style. Rowan Cash, was forced draft achieved through an increasing airflow into the engines? How's it achieved? Right. Forced draft is an interesting expression. There seems to be different points on it. You know. The forced draft is one of those things where they are pushing a lot more power. It actually tends to make the ship deeper, and they're trying to make it faster, and sort of all these things. It's not a scenario you want to put in a lot of ship. So forced draft, when we're talking about that, we're talking about it as depth. It goes down deeper in the water. Deeper in the water, it makes it faster a bit. That's the theory anyway. Jeff Bieler, it's amazing that composite wooden hull ships outlast the younger Orlandos. Jeff Bieler, this is my point of why I say when someone tells me the reason that Fisher was getting rid of ships was their wooden hulls and all this sort of thing, I sit there and go, but there are so many wooden hull ships which survive. So there are lots of legitimate reasons he has for getting rid of ships. I can agree with all of them. But they aren't applied universally. They aren't applied clearly. It's basically, it's like a modern animal going, what are the ships I can most afford to lose without it looking like it's obviously cutting fighting capability? Okay, what's sitting in reserve at the moment? That's gone. Derp Squad, thank you. That's going in the Iron Brew Fund. Jeff Elam, in Mr. Midsham Glover RN, A Tale of the Royal Navy on the day today, author T.D. Jeans felt two Apollos could have taken on the survivors of the Chinese fleet or the Sino-Japanese War. Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. The nicest way, the Sino-Japanese War, if we go back to the Apollos, these would have massacred the Chinese Navy after the Sino-Japanese War. And you don't want to know what anything bigger turns up today. Monster Dragons looks like typical bureaucratic nonsense. Oh, well, just cut that and what comes to mind first. Hello, thank you, Geoff. So, if we go back to the beginning, and we go back to the reality of Empire, and the whole sort of thesis I am sort of in way going through. Jomac, so modern equivalent of Fisher scrapping was Oliver Hazard period decommissions? Yes, especially without any replacements coming through. And that is the big problem. As I say, it's okay to scrap these ships. There are legitimate reasons to scrap them. But if you're not replacing them on even a 2 for 3 basis with more modern ships, you have a problem in that you don't have enough ships for doing the war you need to fight. Because if you are a global empire, and it's all about the global, then you need a global presence force. You need those numbers. And they don't. It's just not enough. It's just not enough. It's not what they can do. Because you do need those ships. And again, when people turn around and go, the RN doesn't have the manpower, I point again to the Royal Navy and Royal Navy Division in the Western Front. The Royal Navy could have had the manpower if it wanted. It had a very good recruitment program. It had a very good reserve program. Instead, it takes a lot of people who want to be sailors and turns them into soldiers. Yes, the Army does need more soldiers. The Army is short. That is why the Navy does it. But if it had had the present ships at the beginning of the war, I would argue they could have made the world a lot safer, a lot quicker for British trade to be going around the world. They could have provided the escort numbers for the convoys quicker and more capably, which might well have stopped the submarines becoming such a threat. Because it's going to sound strange. The reason the Germans put the money they do into submarines isn't because they are planning pre-World War I to put the money into submarines. No, that wasn't really their plan. It's because they start to get success with the submarines because there isn't a convoy, because there aren't enough ships to do the convoys. So they start to put more. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And a self-fulfilling virtuous almost circle from the German perspective. Whereas from a British perspective, it would be something they could have stamped down on. If, let's say, they'd had early convoys going and they'd had enough ships, they could have done some early convoys and started convoys from the beginning, and those convoys would have had... Well, let's see. Orlando, you have a range of 10,000 nautical miles. I do. Would you mind escorting a convoy the entire way across the Atlantic? I am quite happy to. Could you please remove my 9.2-inch guns and therefore replace them with some double 6 inches to make me slightly lighter? Of course, that makes perfect sense. Here, quick conversion. Oh, you're now steaming across the Atlantic with a convoy. Okay, fine. Maybe we have to fit some torpedo bulges as well at some point if we want to keep them in service after 1916. But it doesn't really matter because you have a long-range convoy, an escort which can convoy. And that makes it also things a lot easier because if the ships are coming in convoy the whole way across and they have a warship with them, which has a radio and all these things on it, it can send the radio message going, we are now at this point. We're now at this point. So you have, if you're getting into submarine zone, hello, the destroyers are now here. They are waiting. They form up around the convoy, with the cruiser acting as the convoy commodore for controlling the escorts. And there you go. The destroyers know where to go. Everyone's happy. It makes things so much more effective and efficient. And any submarine comes on the surface before the destroyers arrive to try and do some gunnery action. Hello, I've got lots of 6-inch guns. Do you want to play? This is the thing. So, Fisher is making the right choice from a war-fighting perspective. From this perspective. To get rid of those ships. You have to agree with him. Because they aren't going to be fighting in the Battle of Jutland. They're just not. But from a peace, global war perspective, where you need escorts, where you need ship numbers, those ships are actually useful ships. The bigger ships are easier to convert. He's keeping the smaller ships, mostly because he's possibly not noticing them, and getting rid of the bigger ships, which are the ones which are easier to make longer ranged. Harrier scrapping, yes. So you went, Pearl, what is the thickness of a third-class armor on a third-class cruiser? Well, honestly, I haven't found any mention of any armor anywhere on the Pearl class. If anyone can find out if they actually had some armor, I think it was possibly, according to the picture I'm looking at, they seem to have an angled bit of sort of an armored deck internally to cover the engineering and machinery spaces of 2 inches at the angle on the side and 1 inch on the top. And that's the only armor I can see. And I'm not even sure if that's armor or just fixed steel. Jeff Bearder, the Australian Pearls are the best names ever. Thank you, Australian First Nations. I do agree. Calm Gasman. Jermic, Fisher and scrapping the OH Perry frigates. Except if Admiral Fisher would be now in the USN, the LCS would actually work. Probably, because he would have made sure that it worked. That is one of the things. He did deliver on what he did deliver worked. It's just he couldn't deliver on changing the whole fleet over, building enough ships, and cutting costs. He can't square that triangle. Vision, if the Chinese Navy had added 2 Orlando-class cruisers to Sino-Japanese war fleet, they likely could have won. The pausing in ship buying into 1890s and not adopting quick-firing guns hurt them bad. Yep. Dan Freeman, I'm terrified by the idea of Fisher seeing the current US Navy by 2 things. 1, how quickly he would recommission the Iowa class and get the last 2 built. And 2, he would see nuclear power and go, ooh, want that on everything, so it all goes 30 knots for cruising speed. Probably. Wait to see what incomparable would look like now if he had nuclear power. Drifter, scrapping wooden sloops instead of Orlando's. Orlando's could have escorted Anzac and Indian troop convoys. This is, you see, Jeff, as you were pointing out at the beginning, there are weaknesses with the Orlando class. I agree. But what I say is this wasn't consistently applied. And this is why I have problems with what he does. I understand why he does what he does. I understand he's trying to square his triangle, but even what he does do doesn't seem quite logical to me. Ryan Cash, maybe someone needs to design a ship like a Power Rangers, smaller ships that can patrol and then combine together for battle into one larger super ship. Oh, God, that'd be scary. If someone actually reads that, they could try and do that. That'd be quite scary. Dan Freeman, Fisher is making correct decisions for fighting a war in the North Sea. Pretty much. Calm Gasman, Dan Freeman, and Building Hours. Don't know. If he was a technophile, so if he suddenly were to be cloned, he would listen to bilge pumps and then invite the crew and open up a big dossier. Calm Gasman. So, gentlemen, I have a few questions for you, if you please. I ordered a few pallets of Iron Brew. That would keep us going. Emin, speaking of the Oliver House of Perry class, they were pretty old, so scrapping them did make sense. The replacement was a bit of a downer to see, at least. That's the thing. Again, I agree. It's like with these ships. I can agree with Fisher scrapping them because, in a technical reason, fighting World War I on the North Sea, the Orlando class and these things don't make sense. But for the North Atlantic convoys, for all the things, you can quite easily modify them to be very useful for that role. And having them around would have been useful. See what? Definitely must try and brew. Ridding myself of Diet Pepsi is important. Checked my DNA and I'm 44% Scot. Even 7%, 7 Welsh, so I can take it. Good man. You can survive. Inca, what year was Fisher making decisions about scrapping, and were submarines considered a serious future threat then? In 1904, 1905, and yes, they were considered a potential threat by that point. Mainly because they were torpedoes. The future fleet is torpedoes. It has been around was around since the 1890s. This is why I find it funny when people tell me, the future of the forces are all missiles, and I go, in 1880, the future of the fleet was all torpedoes and no guns. It's 2020. We still have guns and we still have torpedoes, and now we have missiles and aircraft as well. Every time you start thinking you're predicting what the future weapon system of the fleet is, beware another 2 or 3 things will probably pop up as well. HMS Undaunted makes a guest appearance in Midshipman. Mr. Midshipman Glover, R.N. author to Jeans, described as also being able to deal with Chinese cruisers. My first encounter with an Orlando class cruiser. Yep, doesn't surprise me. So, they are... I can understand, as I said, I understand why he was making decisions he was. Just it wasn't necessarily sensible. Dub Squad, anyone who says the future of X is entirely going to be Y is either stupid or trying to sell Y. Usually the latter. Definitely usually the latter. And yes, very true about the technology thing. I noticed that nearly every Luftwaffe plane ended up doing something else than was intended for. BF 110 was ended as a tank buster, for crying out loud. Yep. Mainly trying to emulate what the Hurricanes were being used for in North Africa and doing so well. Cash, just trying to imagine all torpedo USN at the beginning of World War II. Well, they're beginning. They would have had all the fun of their submarines throughout the entire fleet. Yeah. The RN could try and recommission HMS Caroline to help submarine the River class of the present ship. And speaking of machinery, didn't several ships get scrapped, but the machinery used during World War I or World War II? Yep. Cox, Soviet-era fighters seem to end up as ground attack planes in several air forces. It takes Formula One technology to take off, or the equivalent of it, every time you go into the air, as Steve Jobs puts it. It doesn't take Formula One level technology to attach a bomb to an aircraft and drop it. It does take technology, don't get me wrong. But it's very easy. It's very difficult to build a high-performance fighter of its era. It's very easy in the next era to turn that former high-performance fighter into a bomb truck, because as long as it can still, it can already fly, you can work it out. Thomas Van der Velde, how are the Hawker Hurricane? One of the most underrated planes ever. Spitfire got glory, and Hawkers did the flying. Yeah. Hurricanes did a good job. Nah. So, if I'm going to end, I'm going to sort of quickly discuss this. I want to say thank you to everyone who's liked, shared, been watching this. I'd like to say everyone who's, of course, done a super chat. That's been very, very kind. Especially today, because, as I said, today's been a bit of a day. Up and down. Some very good news. which you will find out, which on the Discord was announced. So that was a very much a high point. And then some lower down news. Because basically, one of the groups I work with is being pretty... But no. I have to admit, though, one of the things that has come through, and I can sort of promote this a bit now, is that everything going to plan, as said on Discord, there will be something very, very cool as a Christmas treat for you, for people who listen to the Bilge Pumps. No one in Bilge Pumps or Discord is being pain. It's another group I have to deal with, and they were being a bit... I basically ended up calling them on it, and it looks like it's going to be okay now, but it's never too fun. Ben Laura, down too late. Just got back from hill walking. Just finished the Channel 5 documentary about on board HMS Vengeance. Oh well, I can always watch this back. But please do also ask questions. And it's a lot of fun in terms of what we're doing and what we've got coming up. As I said, I've put a little message out on Discord because there's always the possibility life doesn't cooperate, but it's going to be good. It's going to be very, very good. There is going to be a special Bilge Pumps with all things, hopefully, in the week on the Wednesday the 30th of December, which all I can say is look out for the Wednesday the 30th of December Bilge Pumps. It will probably be a multi-part one, and it is going to have the largest number of panelists we have ever had on, and it is going to be amazing because it's us, the Bilge Pumps regular crew, with 3 really, really, really experienced people to talk about the future of naval warfare, the future of the Royal Navy, the future of other navies, the future of the Royal Marines and Marines and all this stuff. It's going to be epic, is all I can say. It's going to be good. Right now. So, today was the ships that Fisher scrapped. 20 brew ships, 25, some more naval aviation stuff. Then the 10th is Taranto. Then it's the research week beginning, and I've got some long patrol scheduled. And basically, the research week is about me preparing for the 18th of November. So that's why it's scheduled in there. It's to give me time to prepare for the 18th of November and make sure that's really, really at a high level, but also to do the work for the Thursday 19th. So, because I then have basically 2 episodes on top of each other. And normally what I do is I do all the research a couple of weeks beforehand. Then I let it settle. And then I have a couple of days to bring everything together and make sure I have the introduction videos out and then make sure I'm prepped for the video. But what I'm doing, because I've got the 18th on top of the 19th, I've basically scheduled that so I have a week's gap. And it's going to be good. And then we have 26, the Brew Ships 26, the random collection. Then we have the effect of the early jet age, how it affected naval warfare strategy. Then the fairy story. Then Brew Ships 27 and all the others coming up. Town class cruisers in December. And I haven't a patron question. The patron things will go live tomorrow and will last till next Sunday. So not this Sunday, but next Sunday. And then I will do the normal patron vote to pick out which ones I've chosen from the suggestions. Cool. Vision, I always think finding ways of modernizing old ships fascinating. No end to this thought experiment. There is still life in the old gold. That's the point about a lot of these ships. June 2019, 191. 26 was my 21st birthday. Cool. Well, we have the fairy story that day, so I hope you're going to enjoy that. Although if you're not watching on your birthday, I can understand. Steam White. Why were seaplanes were a high-speed test bed for test planes? Just power and design to overcome the drag? Well, to an extent, but also it's actually, the thing is, you have a lot more space to practice around on seaplanes if you're using water than if you're using land-based airfields. There aren't as many land airfields as there are patches of water which you can use to take off and land on. In-car, had some issues with build pumps and the files crashing. Don't know if it's just me. I think you probably, not everyone is having that, but I do have a small problem with the compression software, and sometimes it doesn't seem to work, so I put them up uncompressed, which means they're very big. I do apologize for that. Do you know what? And the 11th is Remembrance Day. Yes. Which is one of the reasons why I have stuff on the 10th, but nothing on the 11th. Eamon, did you get the first Sea Lord on Bill Trumps? Not yet. I'm still trying on that one. Billy B, when comes the Paddle Steamer Special? Paddle Steamer Special will come in December. Will be in December. There will be a Paddle Steamer Special. But it's not coming yet, but it's going to come in December. I'm doing the research for it. And that's another reason I'm going to be doing during the research week, putting together a Paddle Steamer Special. Dan Freeman, things have changed now. I knew you're doing Norway 1940. I thought it was just a watch along. No, there is a long patrol on Norway on 1940 coming out on the Sunday the 15th. That is a long patrol video for you guys to all see on the YouTube channel. But that's also a bit of advertisement for Wednesday 18th of November, where there's a link, and I'm not sure if it's down below on this one, but it is down below on other ones, to the History from Home lecture series, where I am presenting on Norway 1940 in a public seminar. So everyone is allowed to sign up to that and come along to that, and I'll be talking and chatting, and it'll be a whole thing, but it's done through Dan Hill's History from Home series. So it's kind of like when I did the Lawton series, in that it's on there, but I think there are videos produced afterwards of it, and I think anyone can sign up to it. It's an Eventbrite thing, and anyone can sign up to it for free. Constrainers. Well, actually, if you want the fun on the job front, this is something I had. Let's see, when did I get this? Yeah. This is how my week started. I'm not going to tell you which job it's for. I'm sorry to tell you that you were not successful on this occasion. The committee reached its final decisions only after lengthy consideration of over 250 candidates of very high quality who are working in many different fields. For obvious reasons, the choice is not based on a simple assessment of individual merit alone. Several factors, including the nature of proposed research, the need to be in and a desire to keep a balance of across subjects, age, gender, nationality, all play a considerable part in the very difficult assessment of the committee must make in reaching its decisions. We thank you for your application and wish you all the well in your future research. And I would love to say I just had one of those today, but I've had 4 of those in this week, and frankly, it's a bit annoying when they're all saying the similar thing. In that we're no longer selecting on merit, we are selecting on all these other range of factors as well. And it's sort of, there is part of me which feels, okay, I understand the issues, but I can understand where they're coming from, but there's also part of me going, it's my life as well, so it's very selfish for me, I know, but, you know. JP, Canadian warplanes heritage in Hamilton with HMS Hyder had a fairy Firefly, which I saw before it crashed. Sad. I will pardon your French on this occasion, Juno. Jeff Beeler, I shall have to read before the Ironclad. The Guadalupe is a famous paddler, the first iron one to fight another ship at sea. Ooh. I will make sure to try and include that. Cash, I'll see if I can get the ex-second Sea Lord I know to start listening and get him hooked. Then we can rope him into a bilge pump session that has some interesting credentials. That'll be cool. We'll have him along, happily. You'll probably want to listen to the 30th of December one. Because at least they're actually informing you rather than ghosting you. That is the one thing I can be happy of. Ron Cash, Director of Operational Requirements for the Royal Navy, and I want on to be Director of General Fleet Support for Operational Plans. Ooh, sounds cool. Dan Freeman, that was me letting the comment through from June, and it seemed to express my own thoughts. I agree with that. It expressed mine as well. But no, it's I'm looking forward to all these. And as I said, I'm going to be working out the December ones, and December ones will include the Paddle Steamer special. I'm going to be doing that in a special way. Carl Harmon, Doctor, any chance of the Chief joining you for Bilge Pumps? If he wants to join us, we'd be happy to have him. We're still working out December and January is all that's on. I keep trying to point out I'm basically a warship in human form, but that doesn't work when I'm trying to say it. It gave me special status. You know, that's what I feel on the inside. I know that's a terrible joke, and I won't make it, but yeah, it comes up sometimes. Right then, thank you very much. I'm going to say any last questions before we sort of finish, because we'll probably finish at about, well, probably at about 9 o'clock, about 15 more minutes. Mainly so I can go get some tea. I feel the desire to put in. I have a Chicago Town pizzas somewhere, so I will put some of them in. I think. I know they're not great, but I don't feel like ordering anything this evening. Thomas Manuel, yes, it was literally 24/7. They even got used to this caveman's existence. They talked about air raids as if it was weather and wind speed was the death toll. Sheesh, Thomas Vanderveld. They blew up my father almost on an anno train. He jumped off the civilian path into the ammo carrier and released that one from the train because it was on fire, and then ran for his life. That's a very brave gentleman. I hope he got a very big medal for that. Harmon, I do know the chieftain is the tank Drac. I have seen the video of him and Drac having a chat at the Armor Festival at the Tank Museum, and what I find funny is I think I was there that day and wandering around, and I didn't bump into meet Drac then, or anyone. I was just wandering around quietly myself, on my own, because the person who was supposed to be with me wasn't able to come. Dan Freeman, I identify as a Trouble class destroyer of the late 1930s vintage. If that would work to get me custody of HMCS Hyder, I would do that. Carmen, how do you get all these special important guests? How are you so well connected? Boxes of chocolate and basically things which, if they didn't agree with, would be bordering on harassment. There are many options, Dan. There are many options. I could be a slightly Russian, member of the, tribal family. Or Polish even. Thomas Hannon, he got thrown in prison after all, like almost every officer, until he'd proven himself cleaning up mines with sticks for 5 years, with other German prisoner of wars. That's SHT. It's a complicated circumstance, but I'd say for someone who'd done that, unless they could, there's part of me which always thinks, you need to be able to prove they were actually involved in things before you start having them do that and do that to them. But, everyone was using a very, very wide brush at that point for painting. Legacy of a World War. Carmen, basically you spam emails. Not so much spam as find out their telephone numbers. Jeff, we'll have to check the background of Chitrin's videos for you now. Did you see a 6'5" tall person in a Stetson? Yes. In fact, when I looked in that video, I might have spotted me. But you'll have to know what hat I'm wearing to be able to spot me, because, and I don't think I have a beard. I can't remember. Did I have a beard at that time or not? I think I did have my beard then. Yeah. I only shave it off when I'm doing television work and the TV company goes, we don't want you to have a beard. And I go, fine, bye-bye beard. Because if you're prepared to pay me that much a day, I am prepared to shave the beard. Although the moment the pay is over, the beard will come back. I might have been a 6-footish person in a... Well, not a Stetson, but in a hat, definitely. Although, Dan Freeman might have an idea of what hat I was wearing. Dan might have an idea of what hat I'm wearing. Carmen, if Bovington's on next year, chance meeting, I'll probably be wandering that direction. Unless I'm being paid to be somewhere else, that's where I'll be wandering in the direction of. John Vanderbilt, yes, but he said it was partly justified. The Nazi regime was a criminal one that had an agenda that was depraved of any humanity, and realised that early on, but too late to get out. That's life. Greg Sarsley, are we talking out the Tank Fest video? Yes. Come That's my I have a hat I wear when I go to museums, because it's my granddad's hat, and it's always used to what he'd wear when he went to museums, and so he used to take me to museums. And so I wear that hat whenever I go to a museum nowadays as sort of a kind of memory of him, even though quite a lot of people think it's a bit weird. Whenever I remember it, most of the time I do remember it. There are sometimes I go to museums and I forget the hat, but more often than not, I remember it. All right, then. So, thank you, Eric Sharon. Please do remember the classes involved tonight. It's one of those interesting things, some of these classes, because I was going through them and looking at them and going, what classes are relevant and what classes illustrate? And I was concentrating on the ones which illustrate the story most. And these were the classes I felt most illustrated the story. Illustrated the fact that I can see the legitimacy of what Fisher's doing. He has good reasons for it. It's just the way it's enacted and the other consequences of it that make it not work. So no, he carried a hat. He usually wore it when he went round the museum. Same with me. William Cox, the first torpedo was an angry dolphin. The Greeks never spoke of it again. More than likely. Take care, everyone. Have a good 5th of November. Hope you enjoyed this, and thank you. See what? Think I can be tier 10 on World of Warships. Good luck with that. Thank you, Eamon. Thank you, Juno9191. Have a nice evening. Thank you, Sean Mack. Thank you, William Cox. Thank you, Daniel Freeman. Thank you, Thomas van der Velde and Gordon Collins. Thank you, Greg Stadowski, Albert Zapsky, Jeff Beeler. Thank you very much. Well, Geoff Grognard, thank you very much for this. For suggesting this topic. Let's see. Carl Harmon, I think I said thank you. But Constantinopolis, thank you and goodbye. Take care. Dan Freeman, I have mixed feelings about Tanks Fest, having lived in Dorset as it messes up the roads early, but I'd hopefully have a place to stay in Dorchester with friends. That's always a good thing. And if you want to be scared, you have me. You have to remember the vehicle I first learnt to drive on, or the first vehicle I ever drove was a tank. So yeah, me and tanks, I like them. There is a reason there's so many books in my room on armored warfare as well as naval warfare. Basically, it goes armored warfare, naval. It goes naval warfare, Roman warfare, armored warfare in terms of numbers. And well, bilge pumps tomorrow's recording for next week. I have a chance to indulge in my love of Roman warfare because we have Simon on, who is an absolute amazing Roman historian. Let me just check. I can give you all his surname. Simon Elliott. And you are going to love him when you listen to bilge pumps. And take care, everyone. Thank you, Zachary Gherkin. Yeah, well, you know, it was there. I was given the option. I was going to drive it. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Good night, Carl Gasberg. Good night, Dan Freeman. Lionheart X-Ray. Thank you. Take care. And let's see. Carl Gasberg. Once someone with very high social skills might comb through the scrap ships and their captains, and how much their previous and later career contributed to that ship being scrapped. That could be an interesting one. Take care, everyone. Take care, everyone. Thank you.